When it comes to professional fighters notorious for street fighting, there's one man that stands head and shoulders above the rest, Bas Rutten.
He was just blasting people with kicks, fucking people's legs up.
Yeah.
He was fucking people up.
He is the former UFC heavyweight champion, creator of numerous street fight DVDs, and literally has a section about his battles outside of the cage on his Wikipedia. If there's one pro fighter not to mess around with, it's Rutten. Yet, whether it's a group of club bouncers, an American football player, or even 3 Navy SEALs, some people try to test themselves against him, and every time it ends horribly. So these are the times when strangers thought they could fight Bas Rutten. Usually when it comes to street fights, size, weight, and aggression are the most important factors. At least that's what former Chicago Bears linebacker Brian Urlacher thought when Bas Rutten accidentally stepped on his foot at a charity event many years ago.
At the after party, and there was a band playing. The band loved me. They say, hey, we got Bas Rutten here, so jump on stage. So I'm singing with the band. The drummer says, hey, you play drums. You want to play the drums? I play the drums, and I jump off stage, and I'm walking around, and I step on his toes. Kid you not. So I step on his toes, and you know how it goes. You step in, but you don't really step on somebody's toes. And he's pushing me. I said, listen, man, I'm really sorry. I didn't know the guy. I mean, this big guy. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry about it. He says, no, I don't need your sorry.
And at 6'4", 260 odd pounds with an athletic background, Urlacher likely presumed he could intimidate Bas Rutten with ease. But behind all of Rutten's smiles, jokes, and pranks, he's an absolute savage. Throughout the 1990s, Bas was arguably the most feared striker in mixed martial arts, so despite apologizing and even offering to buy Urlacher a beer, the former NFL player continued to push the drama.
I stepped on his toes. Come on, relax, dude. And I wanted to give him a beer, and he kept going. I said, okay, listen, normally I would have knocked you out already, dude. I mean, we're at a fundraiser right now. Now you got to shut up.
And then, Urlacher made the critical mistake, asking Rutten to take things outside.
Drinking a bud or whatever. I said, listen, you want a beer or something? I don't need your beer. I said, listen, normally 3 strikes is out. Please, you gotta stop now, man. So I walk away. I mean, it's a charity event. So he says, you want to take it outside?
Oh, boy.
So my friends and I start laughing, and I say, which was not the reaction he expected, I guess. And I said, yes.
At Urlacher's size, I very much doubt anyone had ever chuckled in his face at the prospect of fighting him, but he clearly had no idea who Bas Rutten was.
And he was like an intelligent animal, was the way I was described.
Well, they're waiting to take you
described
down,
him.
and it's never going to happen.
Because he was so aggressive. Bas was so aggressive. He had that like Holland style with like vicious power, and he was just waylaying people.
Thankfully for the NFL player, someone explained to him that he was trying to fight a pioneer of MMA capable of taking him out in seconds. Most people doubt that Urlacher would have had the same response if it was just some random guy, but in the end, he apologized profusely to Bas.
I think they explained to him who I was, and he came to me and he apologized.
Had Urlacher's ego led him to stepping outside with Bas, it would have been one of the biggest mistakes of his entire life. And while that guy wisely backed down from Bas Rutten, here's a time where numerous people stood their ground. The story began in Tokyo, Japan, presumably during Bas's prime, as this is where a good number of his fights in the 90s took place. It involved 3 guys claiming to be Navy SEALs, using their size to intimidate Japanese people at a bar.
Claiming that they were Navy SEALs. They had Navy SEALs tattooed on their bodies, but they were Navy SEAls. 100% guaranteed they're not, because I trained the SEAls, and they're not guys like that, trust me. So, and they came in, and what happened was I was standing, and I see these, there's a long, it's called Motown, is the bar it's called in Roppongi, in Tokyo. And it's a long bar. And I see so many people flying left and right. They go, what's going on? And I'm looking, and these 3 guys came, and they pushed all these little Japanese people to the side.
And then they made the grave mistake. They pushed Bas to the side like he wasn't even there.
And sure enough, they pushed me as well. I say, hey guys, come on, man. What are you guys doing? And right away, they surrounded me. And you want to go, man? You want to go? Bring it outside.
To make matters worse, Bas wasn't alone. With him was UFC tournament winner and former Pancrase champion Guy Mezger, former UFC, WEC, and Strikeforce champion Frank Shamrock, and a bunch of other fighters. But even in such formidable company, Bas was the one you wouldn't want to have a street fight with. And Guy Mezger warned these so-called Navy SEAls.
He says, we're all professional fighters. Oh, I don't give a crap. I don't give a crap. He says, yeah, I know, I understand that, but from all of us, that's the worst guy to pick a fight with. You shouldn't do this right now. And the guy goes, oh, so you want to go outside? I said, cool. Who do you want to fight? I said, I'll fight all three of you.
Even with all that backup, Bas happily agreed to fight all three of them just by himself, which should have been the sign that they were messing with the wrong person. But with that extra confidence, delusion, and arrogance that only alcohol gives you, the three guys stepped outside the bar ready to duke it out. Little did they know, they were about to fight one of the greatest fighters in the world at the time, and despite being 3-on-1, they were no match whatsoever.
We're walking outside, two of them got dropped instantly. I go bong bong.
Now just 1-on-1, Bas decided to play with his food.
Then I told the guys, I say, you know what? I'm not going to knock him out. I'm going to submit him. You know, I didn't want to do favors. So I remember I got him in an armbar first. He taps. He says he wants to quit. I let him go, and right away he attacks me again.
Whatever submission it was, Rutten was enjoying himself, but with the guy continually tapping out, only to attack him, he decided to choke him unconscious. And to somehow make matters worse, they publicly humiliated the last guy just to teach him a lesson that he isn't as tough as he thinks.
Everybody goes, Bas, just choke him out. I go, okay. And so I choke him out. We laid him on the ground. I believe we pulled his pants down, and we were just waiting for him to wake up. That's what I believe we did at the time. And of course, he got very embarrassed when he woke up.
When Bas goes up against untrained fighters, that's always going to be the outcome. But this next story didn't just involve a fellow UFC fighter, but also the Ukrainian mafia. It was 1996, and Bas Rutten alongside a bunch of fighters headed to Ukraine for an MMA event. Bas wasn't fighting, but instead was invited out as a commentator. Although when he got to the airport, something wasn't right.
I give him my passport, and the guy goes, invitation. So, excuse me. He goes, invitation. I go, oh, relax, dude. Then he goes, pop. He puts it on the desk, and I go, oh, yeah, they sent it to me. He says, but nobody told me to bring it. He goes, whoop. I get caught, handcuffs on, throw in the room. I go, okay, and I'm standing in a room by myself, and 30 seconds later, very fast, some guy comes in, takes me with him, making pictures of me. Yeah. Making pictures, then they uncuffed me, fingerprints. I'm doing the fingerprints, and then they said $35. And he goes, $35 for what? He says, for the pictures.
Back in the 1990s, perhaps this was just a scam that crooked airport officials would pull on unsuspecting tourists, but for some reason, a leader of the Ukrainian mafia decided to rescue Bas from the situation.
Guy yelling, and there's a little guy walking in with a limp, on a cane, and he looked like Joe Pesci. I'm going to show you a picture because I have a picture with him. Like I said, I'm not one to show it on camera because he's a mafioso. And he's with two giant security guys. And he goes to these guards and he gives everybody $100. $100. He yells at one guy. He runs away. He comes back with my luggage. We just walk out.
They jumped in the guy's Cadillac and, according to Bas, drove for 2 hours without anyone saying a single word. And with his history for occasionally crossing the line, Bas actually feared for his life.
I don't know where we're going. I didn't know it was a 2-hour drive, and nobody says a word. And I'm sitting in and my wife has been telling me a long time, she said, one of these days, they're going to kill you. I mean, you're crazy. You're doing way too much crazy stuff. And these people, some people cannot handle it. And I'm sitting there, oh, shit. Now,
this is the drive.
This is the drive.
But instead, it was the total opposite. The Ukrainian mafioso took him to a venue he owned that was part restaurant, part nightclub, and part strip club. And being in Eastern Europe, the vodka was flowing.
And I'm getting drunk with these guys. Yeah. And I'm freaking shooting big glasses of vodka, which that was too much for me. And I'm on the dance, I'm pole dancing. Security guards come. One guy wants to come with, I need to come with him, and he showed his MP5. Yeah. So I just grabbed the barrel and slapped him in the face. This whole thing. And then they finally come with another guy. They take me away. Joe Pesci showed up again. Nope. He's with us. He goes, oh, sorry.
After escaping a gun being pointed at him and security guards trying to escort him out, you'd think that would be the end of the drama for the night. But former UFC fighter Paul Valerans was also at the club. And all crazed up on Ukrainian vodka, Valerans bear-hugged Rutten from behind and weirdly bit his back. And bear in mind, Paul Valerans is a pro fighter, 6'8" and over 300 pounds.
So this big guy, he's attacking me from the back and he's biting. He bit through my skin. Later on we saw there was a hole. I said, Paul, you're hurting me. You got to stop, dude. I'm going to freaking throw you. And in front of me, there is like a mirror against the wall, which I thought was a mirror. So I go, screw it. So I figure for his arm, and I make a sidestep and I throw him against the wall. Well, it was one of those see-through mirrors on one side, you know, security was sitting behind it, so he goes through the freaking glass, stitches everywhere, had to go to the hospital, do the wildest freaking trip.
In the end, they ended up in the hospital with Valerans, and thankfully, the late Valerans actually saw the funny side of the whole story.
Me and Bas Rutten were screwing around, and he ended up throwing me through a glass window, and we're drunk as shit. I guess I bit him on the shoulder. I don't remember. We were
And on the topic of Bas Rutten causing trouble in nightclubs, here's the time he took on numerous Swedish bouncers and actually ended up in prison. If you've ever been someone who goes clubbing, you'll know bouncers have a stereotype for causing fights. Even though they're the ones hired to stop things getting out of control, some bouncers are secretly happy if things get heated.
It's the bouncers. The bouncers really think that they can do something, and I don't know why. Maybe it is because they got more of them, and they think, you know.
So they give you shit. They want to
They
test
give you shit
themselves because they know
try
who
to
you
test
are.
you. It's all, yeah.
Do you find that because of you have such a reputation, do you find that like guys get drunk and then they want to test themselves with you? Does that happen?
I had that till that whole bar fight in Sweden happened, and after that, for some reason, I never had it anymore.
Bas was out in a Swedish club, being his naturally extroverted and wild self, but for the people working the door, Bas was just a bit too energetic.
I'm jumping around and having fun, you know, hey, what's up, everybody, you know, I mean, man, I tried to make friends with everybody, tried to speak Swedish, you know, and they said, can you come with us? So we go to these two doors, and there's a big fire stairs, like a marble stairs, giant, and he says, well, we want you to leave. I said, why? I said, well, you're too much energy, you're flopping around, it's not good, you're bothering the customers. I said, sure, okay.
He agreed to leave the club, but had one final request that seemed pretty fair. Bas asked the bouncers to go grab the friend he was with and let him know that he'd be outside the venue waiting for him. Being in the 90s without iMessage or texting, it would be really easy to lose your friend on a night out, especially if you had been kicked out without them knowing. But the bouncers weren't helpful.
They didn't expect that. They thought I was going to do something, of course, so he pushes me. And I said, now why would you push me? I said, I want to go. It's okay, you know, I don't want any trouble. And he started putting his finger on my chest, which is something I really can't stand, right? So I said, okay, don't touch me, because if you do that again, it's going to go wrong.
They kept poking and prodding at Rutten until he said, screw this, it's on.
And there I went, boom. And that guy went down. He went down like one punch. I've never seen anything. I heard him over the music. I heard that. Yeah, that was the wildest thing ever. And then they had these little microphones, right? So I don't know, but fast. It was 4 or 5 guys. And they start fighting, and the guy that I knocked out constantly, because he would wake up.
Bas had knocked out so many bouncers that they were waking up, getting back in the fight, and getting knocked out again. It must have been an absolute bloodbath. Of course, the police got called, saw the drama unfolding, and locked Bas up in a local prison for 2 or 3 nights. And funnily enough, his wife actually thought he was being unfaithful after finding out her partner had disappeared in Sweden.
After 2 days, they allowed me to give my first phone call. And I'm calling my wife, and she's freaking out. I said, honey, you got to be, okay, relax. I say, I got some good and some bad news. What do you want to hear first? She says, the good news. I say, I didn't fuck 2 Swedish girls. She says the bad news that I'm in jail. You think this is fun? She's going to hate me for this story, because every time she says, you should tell us. You know, it's not funny. I think that's a hell of a story.
But with so many street fight stories to his name that you could write a book, the question has to be asked, just how did Bas Rutten end up this way? There's hundreds, maybe thousands of professional fighters who never get in any altercations whatsoever. Well, a big part undoubtedly is down to his super extroverted personality and enjoyment of partying in his youth. But in truth, his origin in not only street fighting, but MMA altogether all stems back to being bullied as a kid.
I was very sick as a kid, so I was bullied a lot. I had a horrible skin disease. I was the leper in school, that's what they called me. And needless to say, you start building an aggression towards these bullies because it went on a daily basis.
Being a skinnier kid with really severe eczema, Rutten was one of the first the schoolyard bullies would target. For years, he just accepted it until a Bruce Lee movie inspired him to train and get his revenge.
When I was 12 years old, I saw a Bruce Lee movie, sneaked in, started learning martial arts, took 2 years actually to convince my parents. But once I Did it for 2.5 months. I knocked the first bully out, the biggest one in my school. And that's when I realized, wow, this is actually pretty easy.
And after knocking out the biggest bully in his school, Bas wanted to get payback on everyone who had wronged him. So, like Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, he had a list of every bully he had suffered at the hands of.
That guy bullied me, so I started putting down a list, making a list.
Kill
And I
Bill.
went after everybody, yeah. I went after everybody. Some of them were so sad that I just slapped them with the hand. Because they would say, yeah, I don't even remember what I said. I said, but that's the worst
What do you
thing.
mean you went after them? Like, was it like a Taken thing? Like, did you track them down and then?
No, I know
approach-
what it was. It was just in school. I would wait after school or in the break or whatever. I would say, hey, remember that? Bonk, and I would knock him out.
Despite having to stop training temporarily after the police knocked on Bas's parents' house to inform them he had broken a kid's nose, this was the origin story for perhaps the most notorious street fighter in MMA history.